I waited for my son's wedding day, but I wasn't invited. The day I picked up the phone to ask my son Trevor when his wedding would be, his wife Vanessa stared straight at me with a cold smile and said, "Oh, we already got married yesterday. We only invited special people." Those words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Special people. I had spent 3 years paying their rent, $500 every single month. I bought every piece of furniture in their apartment. I filled their refrigerator when they had nothing to eat. And yet, I was not special. I stood there in my own living room, the phone feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand. Trevor avoided my gaze completely, while Vanessa settled herself comfortably on the couch, on the very sofa I had bought for them with money I'd saved from working double shifts. The lavender dress I had carefully chosen for the wedding hung uselessly in my closet, along with the new shoes and the illusion that I'd be part of the most important day of my only son's life. I had spent $200 on that dress, money I didn't really have to spare, imagining how I'd smile in Trevor's wedding photos. Photos where I would never appear. All my plans, my hopes, my dreams shattered within 4 poison words. Only special people. Trevor finally looked up at me, his gaze rehearsed and mechanical, like he'd practiced this moment. "Mum, it was an intimate thing. Very small. Just the two of us and the witnesses." But I knew that was a lie. I'd seen the photos on social media later that night. Photos Vanessa's sister had posted before quickly taking them down. Vanessa's parents beaming next to the happy couple. Her siblings toasting with champagne. The elegant white dress I had helped pay for when Vanessa mentioned she was a bit short on funds. I saw everything I wasn't supposed to see. Everything they'd tried to hide from me. That night, I sat on my bed in the dark, crying tears not of sadness, but of anger and years of silent humiliation building up inside me like a pressure cooker finally exploding. How had I become invisible to my own son? How had my love become a burden, my presence a hindrance, my money the only part of me they valued? I was the perfect mother, the silent provider, the woman who sacrificed everything. And yet, I was not special. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Aunt Uju Voice. I'm so grateful you're here today to listen to this story. To my loyal subscribers, thank you from the bottom of my heart for your love, your support, your likes, your shares, and your thoughtful comments. You make this channel what it is, a place where stories that touch the soul can be heard and felt deeply. Before I begin, I want to say a short prayer for all of you watching. May peace find you in moments of struggle. May strength carry you when you feel weak. May love surround you even when you feel alone. May you be blessed with protection, joy, and hope every single day of your life. May your heart be guarded, and may you always know that you are valued and cherished. Now let me take you back to the beginning of this story, back to when things were different, when my relationship with my son was everything I thought it would always be. My name is Margot Bradford. I'm 51 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been both mother and father to my son Trevor. His biological father, Richard, walked out on us when Trevor was just 4 years old, left one Thursday morning for work, and simply never came back. No explanation, no apology, no forwarding address. Just gone. I won't lie and say it was easy. It wasn't. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep, wondering how I was going to pay the electric bill and buy groceries and keep our small house from falling apart around us. There were moments when I felt so overwhelmed, so exhausted, that I wasn't sure I could keep going. But I did keep going. For Trevor. Because he was my whole world. I worked as an architectural assistant at a small firm downtown. Not glamorous work, not well paid, but steady and reliable. I took on every overtime shift I could get. I worked weekends. I brought work home at night after Trevor went to bed, sketching blueprints at our kitchen table under the dim overhead light while the house settled into silence around me. And I raised my son, alone. I remember the night when Trevor was 7 years old, burning with fever from a terrible case of the flu. His temperature had spiked to 103 degrees, and I was terrified. I sat beside his bed all night long, placing cool cloths on his forehead, singing him the lullabies my own mother had sung to me when I was small. His father was already long gone by then. It was just the two of us against the world. "Mommy, don't leave," Trevor had whispered through chattering teeth, his small hand clutching mine with surprising strength. "I'm not going anywhere, baby," I'd promised him, smoothing his sweat-dampened hair back from his forehead. "I'll always be here. I'll always take care of you." And I was, through every milestone, every challenge, every moment of his life. I was there when he learned to ride a bike, running beside him down the cracked sidewalk of our neighborhood until he found his balance and pedaled away, laughing with pure, unfiltered joy. I was there for every parent-teacher conference, sitting in those uncomfortable plastic chairs while his teachers told me what a bright, kind, wonderful boy I was raising. I was there for every basketball game, even when he mostly sat on the bench, cheering louder than any other parent in the gymnasium. I was there when Sarah Mitchell broke his heart before homecoming in his sophomore year, and he came home crying. At 15 years old, trying so hard to be tough and masculine, but falling apart in my arms like he was 7 again. I held him on the couch while he sobbed into my shoulder, and I told him that any girl who didn't see how amazing he was didn't deserve him. I helped him with his homework at our small kitchen table every night, celebrating every A on his report card with his favorite chocolate cake. Homemade, because I couldn't afford the fancy bakery cakes other kids got. I taught him to drive in my old sedan, gripping the door handle and trying not to show my absolute terror as he learned to parallel park. I taught him to tie a tie for his first job interview. I taught him to believe in himself even when the world felt too big and uncertain. I was both mother and father to Trevor. I was his protector, his cheerleader, his safe place to fall. I was his whole world, and he was mine. And through it all, through every sacrifice and every exhausting day, I dreamed of his wedding day. I imagined walking beside him down the aisle, my hand resting on his arm, both of us dressed in our finest. I imagined dancing with him to a song we'd chosen together, both of us crying happy tears while everyone watched and smiled. I imagined welcoming his bride with open arms, gaining not just a daughter-in-law, but a daughter of the heart, expanding our small family of 2 into something bigger and more beautiful. Those dreams felt so real, so certain, so inevitable. I never imagined they could be stolen from me so completely. I walked over to the refrigerator where a photograph hung beneath a magnet. Trevor at his college graduation 3 years ago, his mortarboard tilted at a jaunty angle. His arms wrapped around me in a fierce, loving embrace. In the photo, we're both beaming at the camera, his face pressed close against mine, joy radiating from both of us. That day, he had leaned down and whispered in my ear, "Mum, I couldn't have done any of this without you. You're my hero. Everything I am, I owe to you. I love you so much." I'd cried then, tears of pride and happiness, and overwhelming love for this boy I'd raised into a man. When had that changed? When had I stopped being his hero and become someone he could exclude from the most important day of his life? Someone he couldn't even tell he was getting married until after it was already done? The answer to that question had a name, a face, and a carefully practiced smile. Vanessa. Trevor met Vanessa 3 years ago at a corporate networking event in downtown Chicago. He was working as a financial analyst at a mid-sized investment firm, ambitious, hard-working, still finding his footing in the competitive world of corporate finance. Vanessa was already established, already successful, already secure in her position at the top. She was a senior marketing director at a Fortune 500 pharmaceutical company, confident and polished in a way that seemed to radiate power and sophistication. I remember the first time Trevor mentioned her. It was during one of our Sunday phone calls, back when we still had those regular, reliable conversations that were the highlight of my week. "Mum, I met someone," he'd said, and I could hear the smile in his voice, the excitement, the hope. "Her name's Vanessa. She's amazing, smart, beautiful, successful. I think she might be the one. I think you'd really like her." My heart had soared hearing those words. Trevor had dated before, a few girlfriends in college, a couple of short relationships after graduation. But I'd never heard him sound quite like this. So excited, so hopeful, so in love. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," I'd said, genuinely happy for him. "Tell me about her. I want to know everything." He'd talked for 20 minutes straight about Vanessa's accomplishments, her impressive family background, her ambitious career goals. And I'd listened with genuine happiness, believing with my whole heart that my son had found someone who would love him the way he deserved to be loved. Someone who would see what an incredible man he was. Someone who would treasure him the way I did. I was so naive, so completely, heartbreakingly naive. The first time Trevor brought Vanessa home to meet me was on a Sunday afternoon in early spring, about 2 months after they'd started dating. I had spent the entire morning preparing for their visit, cleaning the house until every surface sparkled, cooking Trevor's favorite meal of pot roast with roasted vegetables and homemade dinner rolls, arranging fresh flowers on the dining table. I changed my clothes 3 times before settling on a simple blue dress that made me feel both presentable and comfortable. I wanted everything to be perfect. I wanted Vanessa to like me. I wanted her to see how much I loved my son, to understand that I would welcome her into our small family with open arms and an open heart. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. Punctual. That should have been my first clue. I opened the door with a warm, genuine smile, ready to embrace my son and meet the woman who had captured his heart. Trevor stood there in khakis and a crisp button-down shirt, looking handsome and nervous. Beside him was Vanessa. The first thing I noticed was how stunning she was. Tall and slender, with the kind of effortless grace that comes from a lifetime of dance classes and good posture. Her long, dark hair fell in perfect waves past her shoulders, the kind of hair you see in shampoo commercials. She wore designer jeans that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget, and a silk blouse in a shade of ivory that made her skin glow like porcelain. Her makeup was flawless, applied with professional precision. Her jewelry was understated but clearly expensive. Real gold, real pearls, the kind of quality pieces that get passed down through generations. I suddenly felt frumpy and old in my simple blue dress from Target. "Trevor?" I said, pulling him into a hug. He hugged me back, but it was brief, almost perfunctory, not the long, warm embrace we usually shared. "And you must be Vanessa. I'm so happy to finally meet you. Trevor's told me so much about you." Vanessa extended a perfectly manicured hand, her smile polite but cool, like we were meeting at a business conference rather than in my home. "Mrs. Bradford, it's nice to meet you." The handshake was brief, professional, formal. Not the warm greeting I'd anticipated, not the hug I'd hoped for. "Please call me Margot," I said, trying to inject warmth and friendliness into the interaction. Come in, come in. Make yourselves at home. I've made Trevor's favourite meal, pot roast. The house smells wonderful, doesn't it? They followed me inside, and I watched Vanessa's carefully neutral expression as her eyes swept over my living room. I saw her take in the worn carpet that I'd been meaning to replace for 3 years, but couldn't afford. The second-hand furniture I'd carefully maintained and kept clean, but couldn't disguise the age of. The family photos in mismatched frames covering the walls. Memories of Trevor's childhood, our life together. The slightly faded curtains that had once been a cheerful yellow but had dulled to a pale cream over years of sunlight. Her expression never changed, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. Judgment, dismissal, pity maybe. "This is a charming house, Mrs. Bradford," Vanessa said, her voice sweet as honey but with an edge I couldn't quite place. "Very cozy." Cozy. The word felt like an insult wrapped in politeness, a condescending pat on the head. We settled in the living room, and I brought out tea and the chocolate chip cookies I'd baked that morning, Trevor's childhood favourite. I tried to make conversation, asking Vanessa about her work, her family, her interests, genuinely wanting to get to know her and build a connection. "Trevor mentioned you're from the North Shore," I said, pouring tea into my nicest china cups, the set my mother had given me years ago. "That must have been lovely, growing up near the lake." "Yes," Vanessa said, taking a delicate sip of her tea, her pinky slightly raised. "My parents still live in the family home in Winnetka. It's a beautiful area, very exclusive, very private. The neighborhood has this wonderful sense of history and tradition. Old money, you know. Not like these new developments. Winnetka, one of the wealthiest suburbs in Illinois, where homes started at over $1 million and went up from there, where country clubs had waiting lists measured in years and everyone summered at their lake houses. My modest 3-bedroom house in a working-class neighborhood suddenly felt even smaller, even more inadequate. I felt small sitting there in my own living room. Throughout dinner, Vanessa dominated the conversation with stories about her job, her extensive travels to Paris and Tokyo and Barcelona, the exclusive restaurants she'd dined at where reservations required months of advance planning, the impressive connections her family had in Chicago's business and social circles. Every story felt like a subtle reminder of the vast, unbridgeable gap between her world and mine. "Trevor and I went to this incredible new restaurant last week," Vanessa said, delicately cutting her pot roast with her knife and fork held in that European style that screamed upper-class upbringing. The chef trained in Paris under Alain Ducasse, 3 Michelin stars. The waiting list is usually 3 months, but Daddy knows the owner personally, so we got right in. The tasting menu was absolutely divine. 12 courses, each more exquisite than the last. "Have you ever been to a Michelin-starred restaurant, Mrs. Bradford?" The question hung in the air, and we all knew the answer. "No, I haven't had that opportunity," I said quietly, feeling heat rise to my cheeks. Trevor was hanging on Vanessa's every word, clearly impressed and enamored, looking at her like she'd hung the moon and stars. "That sounds wonderful," I said, trying to engage, trying to be part of the conversation. "You know, there's a lovely new Italian place that opened up near downtown. I heard—" "Trevor, we should take your mother there sometime," Vanessa interrupted smoothly, as if I hadn't been speaking at all. "To the Michelin restaurant. It would be quite an experience for her. Something really special. Quite an experience. Something special. As if I lived such a sheltered, limited, small life that a fancy dinner would be a revelation. As if I'd never experienced anything beyond my modest house and my modest existence. as if I was some sort of charity case to be pitied and occasionally treated to glimpses of the finer things in life. I caught Trevor's eye across the table, hoping for some acknowledgement of how condescending that sounded, some sign that he recognized how uncomfortable I was. But he was smiling at Vanessa with such complete adoration that I don't think he even registered the insult buried in her words. After they left that evening, I sat alone in my kitchen washing dishes by hand. My dishwasher had broken 2 months earlier, and I couldn't afford to repair it yet, and replayed every moment of the visit in my mind. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling that had settled deep in my chest like a stone, heavy and cold. Vanessa hadn't been overtly rude. There was nothing specific I could point to and say, this was wrong, this was unacceptable. She'd been polite, pleasant even, but there had been a coldness to her, a subtle condescension that made me feel like an outsider in my own home, like I was beneath her, like I wasn't good enough for her precious time and attention. I told myself I was being paranoid, overly sensitive. Maybe I was looking for problems that weren't really there. Trevor was happy, happier than I'd seen him in years, and that's what mattered. Maybe Vanessa was just nervous about meeting her boyfriend's mother. Maybe she'd warm up over time once she got to know me better, once she felt more comfortable. But time only made things worse. So much worse. Over the following months, I watched helplessly as Trevor slowly, steadily, deliberately drifted away from me. At first it was small things, easy to explain away, easy to rationalize, easy to make excuses for. Trevor, who used to call me every single Sunday evening without fail, a sacred tradition we'd maintained since he moved out, started missing calls. One Sunday, then two, then more. When I'd reach out to him, worried, he'd text back hours later saying he was busy with work or had plans with Vanessa and forgot to call. Our weekly dinners? Another sacred tradition we'd maintained even after Trevor moved into his own apartment across town, became monthly, then sporadic, then non-existent. The text messages I sent throughout the week, just checking in, sharing funny stories, sending him pictures of things that reminded me of him, went increasingly unanswered. When he did respond, his replies were brief, distant. LOL. Cool. Busy RN. Talk later. I tried not to take it personally. I told myself that Trevor was building a life with Vanessa, that it was natural and healthy for him to spend more time with his girlfriend. Young couples needed space to grow together, to build their relationship without interference. I didn't want to be one of those clingy mothers, the kind who couldn't let go, who made their adult children feel guilty for living their own lives. But it felt like more than that. It felt deliberate. It felt like I was being systematically erased. One evening, about 6 months after I'd first met Vanessa, I called Trevor to invite him to Thanksgiving dinner. It would be our first Thanksgiving without him since the day he was born, and I couldn't imagine the holiday without my son. "Hi, sweetheart," I said when he answered, trying to sound cheerful and casual. "I was calling about Thanksgiving. I thought I'd make your favorite. Turkey with that cornbread stuffing you love, sweet potato casserole with the marshmallow topping, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce from scratch, and pumpkin pie. Maybe we could watch football together afterward like we used to. What do you think?" There was a pause on the other end of the line, too long, too weighted, and I knew what was coming before he said a word. "About that, Mom?" Trevor's voice was hesitant, careful, like he was picking his way through a minefield. "Vanessa's family has this big Thanksgiving tradition. They rent this huge house in Lake Geneva every year, and her whole extended family comes. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. Like 40 people. She really wants me to be there. She says it's important for me to bond with her family. I felt my heart sink, felt that familiar ache of disappointment settling into my chest. Oh, of course. That sounds nice. I'm sorry, Mom, Trevor said, and he did sound genuinely apologetic. I know we always spend Thanksgiving together. It's just, this is really important to Vanessa. Her family is really close, and they're all expecting me. I kind of already told them I'd be there. No, no, it's fine, I said quickly, forcing my voice to sound light and understanding, even as tears pricked at my eyes. You should go. You should be with Vanessa and her family. It sounds like it'll be lovely. Are you sure? Trevor asked, but there was relief in his voice. He wanted my permission. He wanted me to absolve him of any guilt. Of course I'm sure, I lied. You're building a life with Vanessa. Her family should be part of that. Maybe I could come visit the weekend after Thanksgiving? Trevor suggested. We could have our own little celebration then, just the two of us. That would be wonderful, I said, grasping desperately at that small hope like a lifeline. I'd love that. Okay, great. We'll plan on it. I'll let you know closer to the date. But he never did let me know. The weekend after Thanksgiving came and went without a word from Trevor. When I finally texted to ask about our plans, he responded, Sorry, Mum. Vanessa and I are swamped with holiday stuff. Rain check? I spent Thanksgiving alone that year. I made a small turkey breast. No point in cooking a whole bird just for myself, and ate it at my kitchen table, watching the parade on my laptop. I tried not to think about Trevor laughing and celebrating with Vanessa's large, wealthy, picture-perfect family in their beautiful lakeside vacation home. I tried not to think about how, for the first time in 25 years, my son wasn't with me on Thanksgiving. Christmas was the same. New Year's was the same. Trevor had plans with Vanessa's family, always with Vanessa's family, and that's when I started to understand. This wasn't just about Trevor being busy or Vanessa wanting to spend time with him. This was something more deliberate, more calculated, more intentional. I was being systematically removed from my son's life, slowly, carefully, piece by piece. When Trevor called to tell me he'd proposed to Vanessa, I pushed aside all my hurt feelings, all my accumulated disappointments, and tried with everything in me to be genuinely happy for him. He was my son. His happiness was supposed to be my happiness. That's what good mothers did. They celebrated their children's joy, even when their own hearts were breaking. Mum, I have big news. Trevor's voice was excited, almost giddy, more animated than I'd heard him in months. I proposed to Vanessa last night, and she said yes, we're engaged. I forced brightness into my voice, swallowing down the complicated mix of emotions churning in my chest. Joy for Trevor, fear of losing him completely, grief for the relationship we used to have. Oh, Trevor, that's wonderful. Congratulations, sweetheart. I'm so happy for you both. Thanks, Mom. I wanted you to be one of the first to know. One of the first, not the first, just one of many people on his list to inform. Tell me everything, I said, trying to sound enthusiastic. How did you propose? I took her to Alinea, that 3 Michelin-star restaurant in Chicago I told you about, the one that's supposed to be one of the best restaurants in the world. I had this whole thing planned with the staff. They brought out this special dessert, edible helium balloons, or something crazy like that, and the engagement ring was hidden inside this chocolate sphere that melted when they poured hot caramel over it. When Vanessa saw the ring, I got down on one knee right there in the dining room. Everyone in the restaurant started clapping. It was like something out of a movie. Vanessa cried, happy tears, obviously. She was completely shocked. It was perfect. Despite everything, despite all my complicated feelings, I felt genuinely moved by the image. My son proposing to the woman he loved, creating a beautiful memory. That sounds absolutely beautiful, Trevor. Really beautiful. She must have been so surprised. She was completely shocked. She had no idea it was coming. She keeps looking at the ring and crying happy tears. He laughed, a sound of pure joy that made my heart ache with love for him. I'd love to meet up with you both soon, I said carefully, hopefully. Maybe we could celebrate together? I could take you both out to dinner, my treat. Or if you'd rather come here, I could cook something special. That's really nice, Mom, Trevor interrupted, his tone shifting slightly, becoming more distant. But we're pretty swamped right now. Vanessa's already started planning the wedding, and honestly, it's turning into this huge production. Her mum is really involved, like super involved, and there are a million decisions to make. Venues, caterers, florists, guest lists, photographers, DJs. It's kind of overwhelming, to be honest. Well, I'd love to help with whatever you need, I offered, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. I know planning a wedding can be stressful and time-consuming. If you need anything at all, someone to make phone calls or run errands or research vendors or just talk through decisions, I'm here. I want to help. I want to be part of this. I'll let you know, Trevor said quickly. But honestly, Vanessa and her mum pretty much have it under control. They're both really into all the details and planning stuff, and they've got this whole vision for everything. I'm mostly just signing off on whatever they decide and writing checks. He laughed. A familiar pang of exclusion twisted in my chest, sharp and painful. I understand. But I'm here if you need me. This is such an exciting time, and I want to be part of it. You're my only son, and this is your wedding. Of course, Mom, Trevor said quickly, almost absently. Listen, I should go. Vanessa's calling on the other line. I'll talk to you soon, okay? Okay. I love you, Trevor. Love you too, Mom. But soon never came. Weeks turned into months. The wedding planning happened without me. In rooms I was never invited into, in conversations I was never part of, in decisions I had no voice in. I would occasionally reach out to Trevor, asking carefully about how things were going, offering once again to help with whatever they needed, trying desperately to stay connected to this major event in my son's life. His responses were always brief, polite, distant. Everything's going great. Vanessa's handling it. We've got it under control. I never received a single call from Vanessa asking for my input on anything. Not the dress, not the flowers, not the venue, not the menu, not the music, nothing. I was never invited to dress shopping or venue tours or cake tastings or any of the pre-wedding events that mothers traditionally participate in. I wasn't asked about guest lists or seating arrangements or colour schemes or any of the 1,000 details that go into planning a wedding. I told myself that modern weddings were different, that maybe Vanessa preferred to plan things with her own mother, and that was okay, that I shouldn't take it personally. I tried to be understanding, to give them space, to not be the overbearing mother-in-law before I was even officially a mother-in-law. But it felt deeply, achingly, devastatingly personal. One afternoon, I ran into Linda Morrison, an old friend from my church, at the grocery store. "Margot!" Linda called out, hurrying over with a big smile, her cart rattling. "How are you? I haven't seen you in ages. I heard through the grapevine that Trevor's getting married. You must be over the moon. So exciting." I forced a smile onto my face, trying to look like the happy mother of the groom. "Yes, I'm very happy for him." "When is the wedding?" Linda asked eagerly, her eyes bright with genuine interest. "Where are they having it?" I bet it's going to be absolutely beautiful. You must be so busy helping with all the planning. My smile faltered. Heat rose to my cheeks. You know, I'm not entirely sure of all the details yet. They're still finalizing some things. The truth, the humiliating, painful truth, was that I had no idea. I didn't know the date. I didn't know the venue. I didn't know the guest list. I didn't know any of it. I didn't even know if I was invited. Linda's expression shifted, sympathy flickering in her eyes as she realized something was very wrong. Oh, well, I'm sure it will be lovely. Give Trevor my congratulations. I will. It was good seeing you, Linda. After Linda walked away, I stood in the produce aisle, gripping my shopping cart with white knuckles, fighting back tears. This was supposed to be one of the happiest times of my life. My only son getting married, starting a family of his own, entering this new phase of adulthood. Instead, I felt like a stranger, an outsider looking in at my own child's life through a window I couldn't open. That night, I decided I couldn't keep living in this horrible limbo, this uncertainty, this painful not knowing. I needed answers. I deserved answers. I called Trevor and left a voicemail when he didn't answer. Trevor, it's Mom. I need to talk to you about the wedding. Please call me back as soon as you can. It's important. He didn't call back that night, or the next day, or the day after that. Finally, after a week of silence that felt like torture, after a week of checking my phone constantly and jumping every time it rang, I called again. This time, Trevor answered. And that's when my entire world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Hey, Mum, Trevor said when he picked up, his voice sounding rushed and slightly annoyed. Sorry I haven't called back. Things have been absolutely crazy with work and wedding planning and everything. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I gripped the phone tightly, forced myself to take a deep breath, and asked the question I was terrified to hear the answer to. Trevor, I need to ask you something directly, I said, my voice shaking despite my efforts to stay calm. When is your wedding? What's the date? There was a long pause, too long, the kind of silence that screams louder than words. Mum, about that? Trevor began carefully, and I knew. I knew before he said anything else. Trevor, when is the wedding? I repeated, my voice rising despite my efforts to control it. We got married last Saturday, he said quietly. It was a small ceremony, just immediate family and a couple of close friends. The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually stumbled backward, my free hand reaching out to grip the kitchen counter to keep myself from falling. The room seemed to tilt around me. You got married? My voice came out as barely a whisper. Last Saturday? Trevor, that was 6 days ago. Yeah. We decided pretty last minute to keep it really small and intimate. Just Vanessa's parents, her brother and sister, and maybe 5 or 6 of our closest friends. We wanted something simple and personal, not a big production with hundreds of people. Trevor, I'm your mother, I said, my voice breaking completely now, tears streaming down my face. I'm your only parent. I'm your only family. How could you not tell me? How could you not invite me? How could you exclude me from the most important day of your life? Mum, please don't make this harder than it already is, Trevor said, his tone becoming defensive, almost cold. This was Vanessa's day, and she wanted to keep it small and stress-free. She has really severe anxiety about big crowds and lots of people watching her and being the center of attention. Having too many people there would have made her really uncomfortable and anxious. I'm not a crowd, Trevor. The words came out as a sob. I'm your mother. I carried you for 9 months. I labored for 19 hours to bring you into this world. I raised you completely alone after your father abandoned us. I worked myself to complete exhaustion to give you everything you needed: clothes, food, education, opportunities, love. I sacrificed everything for you, and you couldn't even tell me you were getting married. This is exactly why we didn't tell you, Trevor said, his voice hardening, becoming cruel. We knew you'd react like this. We knew you'd make it all about you. Make yourself the victim, guilt trip me instead of just being happy for us. The accusation felt like a knife directly to the heart. Make it about me? Trevor, this is one of the most important moments in your life, and you deliberately, intentionally excluded me from it. You didn't just not invite me, you actively hid it from me. How am I supposed to feel? What did I do to deserve this? Vanessa's parents paid for everything, Trevor said coldly, as if that explained everything, as if that justified everything. They rented the venue, hired the caterer, the photographer, the florist, the DJ, everything. It was completely their event. They got to decide who was invited. It was their money, their choice. So that's what it comes down to? I asked, stunned, feeling like I didn't even know this person on the phone. Money? I couldn't afford to pay for your wedding, so I didn't deserve to be there. I wasn't worthy of an invitation because I'm poor. Is that what you're telling me? That's not what I'm saying, Trevor protested, but his voice lacked any conviction. I'm saying that Vanessa and her family planned this wedding, and we went along with what they wanted because it was easier and it made sense. Easier for who, Trevor? I demanded, anger finally breaking through the pain. Not for me. Definitely not for me. Do you have any idea how much this hurts? How betrayed I feel right now? How humiliated? Mom, I didn't call to fight with you, Trevor said, his voice going flat and distant and final. What's done is done. We're married now and we're happy. I hope you can find a way to be happy for us too. I hope you can be supportive. Trevor, please, I begged, my pride completely gone now, reduced to begging my own son for scraps of affection. Help me understand. What did I do wrong? When did I lose you? When did I become someone you could treat like this? Trevor sighed heavily, like I was a burden, an annoyance he had to deal with. You didn't do anything wrong, Mum. This isn't about you. This is about me and Vanessa starting our own life together, and we need to establish healthy boundaries. Vanessa's therapist says it's really important for couples to create some distance from their families of origin so they can build their own identity as a couple without interference or codependency. Distance from families of origin, interference, codependency. The clinical therapy speak language felt like another slap, another dismissal. Distance? I repeated, my voice hollow, emptied of everything. Trevor, we barely speak anymore. I haven't seen you in months. You've cut me out of your life almost completely. That's not distance. That's abandonment. You've abandoned me just like your father did. I have to go, Mom, Trevor said abruptly, cutting me off. Vanessa and I are leaving for our honeymoon in a few hours. We're flying to Paris. Vanessa's always wanted to go. 2 weeks in Paris, and then a few days in the French countryside. Look, I'll call you when we get back, okay? We can talk more then if you want. Where are you staying? I asked desperately, pathetically, trying to maintain some thread of connection, some link to my son's life. What hotel? How long will you be gone? 2 weeks. We'll be back at the end of the month. I really have to go now, Mom. We still need to finish packing, and we have to leave for the airport soon. Trevor, I love you, I said, my voice cracking with emotion, with desperation, with grief. No matter what happens, no matter how much you hurt me, no matter how far you push me away, I will always love you. You're my son. You're my whole world. I know, Mum, Trevor said, his voice softer for just a brief moment. I love you too. But the words felt empty, automatic, meaningless. Words said out of obligation rather than feeling. And then the line went dead. I stood in my kitchen for what felt like hours, still holding the phone in my hand, tears streaming down my face in hot, angry, endless rivers. The champagne flutes on the counter caught the late afternoon light, their gold rims glinting mockingly, cruel symbols of celebrations that would never happen and dreams that had died. I thought about the lavender dress hanging in my closet, the elegant, expensive dress I'd seen in a boutique window 6 months ago and splurged on, despite not really being able to afford it, imagining myself wearing it to Trevor's wedding, imagining how proud and beautiful I would feel standing beside my son on the most important day of his life. That dress still had the tags attached. It would never be worn, never be seen, never matter. I thought about all the years I'd sacrificed for Trevor, the late nights working overtime so he could have nice clothes for school and not be bullied for wearing second-hand things. The times I'd eaten ramen noodles for dinner, or sometimes nothing at all, so Trevor could have fresh fruit and vegetables and protein. The community college courses I'd started but never finished, because I couldn't afford both tuition and Trevor's basketball fees, and he wanted basketball so badly. The dates I'd turned down, the friendships I'd let fade, the social life I'd completely forgone, because being Trevor's mother was my entire identity, my entire purpose, my entire life. And for what? To be excluded from his wedding? To be treated like an embarrassing relic of a past he'd rather forget? To be erased from the most significant moment of his adult life, as if I'd never mattered at all? I sank slowly to the kitchen floor, my back against the cabinet, and let myself sob. Great, heaving, ugly sobs that came from somewhere deep in my soul, releasing years and years of accumulated hurt and disappointment and grief and rage. My son had married without me, and in doing so, he'd sent a clear, unmistakable, devastating message. I didn't matter. I wasn't important. I wasn't valued. I wasn't wanted. I was not special. The pain was unbearable, suffocating, all-consuming. But even as I cried, even as my heart shattered into a million pieces on that kitchen floor, even as I felt like I might actually die from the grief, a small voice in the back of my mind whispered a different truth. This wasn't the end of my story. This was just the beginning of a new chapter. And Margot Bradford, who had survived abandonment and single motherhood and poverty and heartbreak and every other terrible thing life had thrown at her, was about to discover just how strong she really was. If this story is resonating with you, if you've ever felt excluded or undervalued by someone you love, if you've ever given everything to someone only to be treated like you don't matter, please hit that like button right now. Leave a comment sharing your experience. Your words might help someone else who's going through the same pain feel a little less alone. Your engagement helps this channel grow and ensures these important stories reach the people who desperately need to hear them. And if you haven't already, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that might speak directly to your heart. Because what happened next in my journey, the choices I made, the strength I found, the transformation I underwent, the way I rose from the ashes of that devastating moment, that's a story you absolutely won't want to miss. The days after that phone call blurred together into one long, endless nightmare. I called in sick to work for 3 days straight, something I'd never done in my entire career, even when I'd had the flu so badly I could barely stand. But this was different. This wasn't physical illness. This was a wound so deep, so raw, that I couldn't imagine functioning in the world, couldn't imagine putting on professional clothes and pretending everything was fine. I stayed in my house with the curtains drawn, moving from my bed to the couch and back again, like a ghost haunting my own life. I didn't eat. Food tasted like ashes in my mouth. I didn't shower. I didn't answer the phone when it rang, though it wasn't Trevor calling. Never Trevor. I spent hours scrolling through Trevor's social media, torturing myself with glimpses of his new life. There were no wedding photos posted yet. They were saving those for after the honeymoon, apparently. But there were old photos of him and Vanessa that I stared at until my eyes burned, trying to find the moment when I'd lost him, trying to understand when I'd become disposable. On the fourth day, my friend and co-worker Jennifer showed up at my door, pounding until I had no choice but to answer. "Margot, open this door right now," Jennifer demanded, her voice muffled but firm. "I know you're in there. Your car is in the driveway, and you haven't been to work in 3 days without a word to anyone. Open the door, or I'm calling the police for a wellness check." I dragged myself off the couch and opened the door, blinking against the afternoon sunlight that felt like an assault after days in darkness. Jennifer took one look at me. Unwashed hair, stained pajamas, tear-swollen eyes, and her expression crumbled with concern. "Oh, honey," she said softly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "What happened?" And I told her everything. The whole humiliating, devastating story poured out of me in a rush of words and tears. Jennifer listened without interrupting, her hand holding mine, her eyes filling with sympathetic tears. When I finished, Jennifer pulled me into a fierce hug. "Margot, I'm so sorry. I'm so incredibly sorry. That is unforgivable. What Trevor did, what he and that woman did, is absolutely unforgivable." "I don't know what I did wrong," I whispered into her shoulder. "I've been going over it in my head 1,000 times. What did I do that was so terrible that my own son couldn't even tell me he was getting married?" "You didn't do anything wrong," Jennifer said firmly, pulling back to look me in the eyes. "Do you hear me? You didn't do anything wrong. You were a wonderful mother. You sacrificed everything for that boy. This isn't about you, Margot. This is about him making selfish, hurtful choices. This is about him being manipulated by a woman who clearly wants to isolate him from you." "But maybe I was too much," I said, voicing the fear that had been circling in my mind like a vulture. Maybe I was too clingy, too needy. Maybe Vanessa's right that I needed to give them space. "Stop," Jennifer interrupted sharply. "Stop right there. You're doing what so many good people do. You're taking responsibility for someone else's cruelty. Trevor is a grown man who made a choice. He chose to exclude you. He chose to lie to you. He chose to hurt you in the worst possible way. That's on him, not you." Her words were a lifeline I desperately needed to grab onto. "I need to shower," I said finally, suddenly aware of how I must look, how I must smell. "I'm a mess." "Yes, you are," Jennifer agreed with gentle honesty. "But you're a mess who's been through something traumatic. Now go shower. I'm going to make you something to eat, and then we're going to figure out how you're going to survive this." Trying to find answers. Jennifer's visit pulled me out of the worst of my despair, but it didn't heal the wound. Nothing could heal that. The pain was always there, a constant ache in my chest that I woke up with every morning and carried with me through every moment of every day. I went back to work, forcing myself to function, to be professional, to draft blueprints and meet with clients and pretend my world hadn't imploded. but I was going through the motions, a hollow version of myself. At night, alone in my house, I found myself researching family estrangement online. I needed to understand. I needed to know if what I was experiencing was normal, if other parents had gone through this, if there was a way to fix it. What I found was both comforting and devastating. There were entire forums, support groups, websites dedicated to parents who had been cut off by their adult children. Thousands upon thousands of parents, mostly mothers, sharing stories eerily similar to mine. Adult children who had slowly drifted away, who had been influenced by partners or spouses, who had decided their parents were toxic or unhealthy and cut off contact completely. I read story after story, sobbing as I recognized myself in these other heartbroken parents. The confusion, the guilt, the desperate attempts to understand what had gone wrong, the self-blame. One website talked about something called parental alienation, when one person deliberately turns a child, or in this case, an adult child, against another parent. The strategies were chillingly familiar: isolating the target parent, rewriting family history to cast the parent as harmful or inadequate, encouraging the child to establish boundaries that were really just walls, framing the parent's normal desire for connection as unhealthy codependency. It was a checklist of everything Vanessa had done, everything Trevor had allowed her to do. But understanding it didn't make it hurt less. If anything, it hurt more, knowing that this had been deliberate, calculated, intentional. A surprise visitor. 3 weeks after the devastating phone call, Trevor and Vanessa returned from their honeymoon. I knew, because Vanessa had posted dozens of photos on social media: the Eiffel Tower, charming cafes, vineyards in the countryside, the two of them looking blissfully happy. I hadn't heard a word from Trevor since that phone call. No text, no email, nothing. As if I'd ceased to exist the moment he hung up. Then, on a rainy Tuesday evening, my doorbell rang. I opened the door to find a woman I didn't recognize standing on my porch. She was about my age, maybe a few years older, with kind eyes and an uncertain expression. "Mrs. Bradford? Margot?" she asked tentatively. "Yes," I said warily. "Can I help you?" "My name is Patricia Hartley," she said. "I'm Vanessa's aunt, her mother's sister. I'm sorry to show up unannounced like this, but could I come in? I need to talk to you about something important." My first instinct was to say no, to slam the door in the face of anyone connected to Vanessa. But curiosity, and something in Patricia's expression that looked like genuine concern, made me step aside. "Come in," I said. We sat in my living room, and Patricia declined my offer of tea or coffee. She looked uncomfortable, like she was struggling with what she wanted to say. "I'm going to be direct," Patricia finally said. "I was at Trevor and Vanessa's wedding. I saw the guest list. I noticed you weren't there. And when I asked Vanessa about it, about why Trevor's mother wasn't at his wedding, the way she answered made me concerned." My heart started pounding. What did she say? Patricia hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "She said you were toxic, that you were emotionally manipulative, and that Trevor needed to distance himself from you for his own mental health." She said it very casually, very matter-of-factly, like it was an obvious truth that everyone accepted. The words felt like a punch to the gut. Toxic, manipulative. "But here's the thing," Patricia continued. "I've heard Vanessa say those exact same words about other people. Her college roommate, who she dropped without explanation. A close friend from work who suddenly became persona non grata. Even her own father for a brief period, until he apologized for some perceived slight. I never fully understood." Vanessa has a pattern of cutting people out of her life and convincing everyone around her that those people were harmful or toxic. I sat there, stunned, as Patricia continued. My sister, Vanessa's mother, she enables this behavior. Always has. Vanessa is her golden child who can do no wrong. If Vanessa says someone is toxic, my sister accepts it without question. And now it seems like Trevor has fallen into that same pattern. Why are you telling me this? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Patricia's eyes were sad, but resolute. Because I've watched Vanessa do this to too many people. And because I could see in Trevor's face at that wedding that he wasn't entirely comfortable with what was happening. He looked guilty, conflicted. Like he knew, deep down, that excluding you was wrong, but he couldn't or wouldn't stand up to Vanessa. I don't know what to do with this information, I said honestly. It doesn't change anything. Trevor made his choice. Maybe not right now, Patricia said gently, but I wanted you to know that you're not crazy. You're not imagining things, and you're not the villain in this story, no matter what Vanessa might be telling people. After Patricia left, I sat in my living room for a long time, processing what she'd told me. Part of me felt vindicated. I wasn't crazy. I hadn't done anything wrong. This was Vanessa's pattern of behavior. But another part of me felt even worse. Because if Patricia was right, if Vanessa was systematically isolating Trevor from anyone who might challenge her control over him, then my son was in a manipulative relationship, and I was powerless to help him. The confrontation. I spent days wrestling with what to do with Patricia's information. Should I reach out to Trevor? Should I confront Vanessa? Should I do nothing and hope that Trevor would eventually see the truth? The decision was made for me when, 2 weeks after Patricia's visit, Trevor called. "Hey, Mom," he said, his voice carefully casual. "Vanessa and I were thinking of stopping by this weekend. Maybe Saturday afternoon? We wanted to bring you some things from Paris." My heart leaped. He wanted to see me, wanted to bring me gifts, but I forced myself to stay calm. "That would be fine." "Great. We'll be there around 2. Saturday came, and I prepared for their visit like I was preparing for battle. I cleaned the house, made sure I looked presentable but not like I'd tried too hard. I rehearsed what I wanted to say, the questions I needed to ask, the boundaries I needed to set. At exactly 2 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find Trevor and Vanessa standing there. Trevor looked tan and healthy from the honeymoon. Vanessa looked perfect, as always. Designer sundress, expensive sunglasses pushed up on her head, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, Mom," Trevor said, leaning in to give me a brief, awkward hug. "Hello, Mrs. Bradford," Vanessa said, her voice dripping with false warmth. "You look well." We settled in the living room, the same room where so many uncomfortable encounters had already taken place. Trevor handed me a shopping bag. "We got you some things in Paris," he said. "Some lavender soap from Provence, a scarf from this little boutique, some chocolates. Just thought of you." I looked at the gifts, peace offerings, guilt gifts, and felt anger rising in my chest like a tide. "Thank you," I said, setting the bag aside without looking through it. "Trevor, Vanessa, we need to talk." Trevor's expression immediately became guarded. "About what?" "About the fact that you got married without telling me," I said, my voice steady despite the emotion roaring through me. "About the fact that you excluded me from the most important day of your life and then disappeared for 3 weeks without a word." "Mum, we already talked about this," Trevor said, his tone becoming defensive. "I explained." You explained nothing, I interrupted. You gave me excuses and blamed Vanessa's anxiety and acted like I was being unreasonable for being hurt. But we never actually talked about it, so we're going to talk about it now. Vanessa's expression had gone cold, her eyes calculating. Mrs. Bradford, I don't think this is productive. I wasn't talking to you, I said sharply, keeping my eyes on Trevor. Trevor, I need you to help me understand. What did I do that was so terrible that you couldn't tell me you were getting married? What did I do to deserve being cut out of your life like this? Trevor looked at Vanessa, as if seeking permission or guidance. That look, that automatic deference to his wife, told me everything I needed to know. Mum, it's not about what you did, Trevor said, his voice taking on that rehearsed quality that suggested these weren't entirely his own words. It's about establishing healthy boundaries as we start our married life. Vanessa and I need to create our own family unit without interference. I'm not interference. The words burst out of me, louder than I intended. I'm your mother. Wanting to be at your wedding isn't interference. Wanting to have a relationship with you isn't interference. That's called love, Trevor. That's called family. Your version of love feels like control, Vanessa said coolly, her mask of false warmth completely dropped now. Trevor has told me about how you've always made him feel guilty for having his own life, how you've used your sacrifices as a weapon to keep him obligated to you. That's not true. I turned to Trevor, desperate for him to deny it, to defend me. Trevor, have I ever made you feel guilty? Have I ever tried to control you? Trevor wouldn't meet my eyes. Sometimes it felt like I could never do enough. Like no matter what I did, you needed more from me. The accusation felt like a betrayal deeper than the wedding exclusion. I needed more? Trevor, I needed basic respect. I needed to be treated like I mattered. I needed to not be lied to and excluded and thrown away like I was nothing. You're being dramatic, Vanessa said dismissively. This is exactly the kind of emotional manipulation Trevor's been dealing with his whole life, making everything about your feelings, making him responsible for your happiness. Get out, I said quietly. Vanessa blinked. Excuse me? Get out of my house, I repeated, louder this time. You don't get to come into my home and tell me that loving my son is manipulation. You don't get to twist my normal human feelings into some kind of pathology. Get out. Mom, Trevor started. Both of you, I said, standing up. Get out. Trevor, when you're ready to have a real conversation, just you and me, without her telling you what to think and feel, you know where to find me. But until then, I'm done being disrespected in my own home. Vanessa stood up, her face flushed with anger. Come on, Trevor. I told you this was a waste of time. Trevor stood slowly, looking torn, looking like maybe, just maybe, he was starting to see something he'd been refusing to see. Mom, Go, I said, my voice breaking. Just go. They left. I closed the door behind them and sank to the floor, shaking with adrenaline and grief and something else. Something that felt almost like relief. I'd stood up for myself. I'd set a boundary. I'd refused to accept their treatment of me. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like loss, but it also felt like the first step toward something different, toward survival, toward healing, toward finding myself again beneath all the years of being defined solely as Trevor's mother. Reaching out for help. The next day, I called the employee assistance program at work and asked for a referral to a therapist. If I was going to survive this, if I was going to find any path forward, I needed professional help. I couldn't do this alone anymore. Dr. Sarah Chen's office was in a converted brownstone downtown, warm and inviting with soft lighting and comfortable furniture. Dr. Chen herself was a woman in her early 50s, with gentle eyes and a calm presence that immediately made me feel safe. In our first session, I told her everything. The whole story poured out. Trevor's childhood, my years of single motherhood, meeting Vanessa, the slow erosion of my relationship with Trevor, the wedding exclusion, the confrontation. Dr. Chen listened without judgment, occasionally taking notes, asking clarifying questions. "What you're describing," she said when I finished, "is a form of grief. You're grieving the loss of a relationship that was central to your identity. That's not dramatic or weak. That's a profound loss." "How do I stop grieving?" I asked. "How do I move on?" "You don't stop grieving," Dr. Chen said gently. "You learn to carry the grief while still building a life. You learn that you can love someone and still set boundaries with them. You learn that your worth isn't determined by whether your son includes you in his life." Over the following weeks, Dr. Chen helped me understand patterns I'd never recognized. How I'd made Trevor the center of my entire world, so that when he pulled away, I had nothing left. How I'd defined my worth entirely through motherhood, so that when Trevor rejected me, I felt worthless. "You need to build a life that isn't centered around waiting for Trevor to come back," Dr. Chen said. "Not because he doesn't deserve your love, but because you deserve more than a life spent waiting for someone else to decide you're worthy of their attention." It was the hardest truth I'd ever had to accept. Building a new life. With Dr. Chen's guidance, I started to slowly, painfully rebuild my life. I joined a book club at the local library, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for because I'd been too busy being available for Trevor. The women in the book club were smart and funny and kind. And for the first time in months, I found myself laughing at something that wasn't bitter or sarcastic. Jennifer convinced me to join her for a weekend trip to a small town in Michigan, exploring antique shops and eating at local restaurants. It felt strange, almost guilty, to enjoy myself. But I did enjoy myself. For whole hours at a time, I didn't think about Trevor or Vanessa or the wedding. I was just Margot, a woman browsing through old books and trying new foods and sleeping in a charming bed and breakfast. I started taking evening walks around my neighborhood, something I'd stopped doing years ago. I'd forgotten how beautiful the world could be in the soft light of early evening, how good it felt to move my body, to breathe deeply, to exist in the present moment, rather than drowning in past hurt or future anxiety. I volunteered at a youth center downtown, helping teenagers with their homework. At first, it was painful. These kids reminded me of Trevor at that age, and I'd find myself tearing up over their algebra problems. But gradually, it became healing. I could give to these kids what I couldn't give to Trevor anymore. I could be helpful, needed, valued. One of the kids, a 15-year-old named Marcus who struggled with math, reminded me especially of Trevor. He had the same quick smile, the same self-deprecating humor when he got an answer wrong. "You're really good at this," Marcus said one evening after I'd helped him finally understand polynomial equations. "Like, you should be a teacher or something." "I'm just a mum," I said automatically, then stopped. "Actually, no. I'm an architect and a volunteer and a book club member. And a lot of other things." It was the first time I'd defined myself as something other than Trevor's mother. It felt revolutionary. Unexpected contact. 2 months after the confrontation, I received an unexpected text from Trevor. "Mum, can we talk? Just the two of us?" My heart leapt, but I forced myself to pause before responding. Dr. Chen and I had talked about this possibility, about how to protect myself while still leaving the door open for reconciliation. When and where? I texted back. Coffee? Tomorrow afternoon? That place near your house you like? The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop 10 minutes early, my stomach churning with anxiety and hope in equal measure. I ordered my usual latte and sat at a table by the window, watching for Trevor. He arrived exactly on time, looking nervous and tired. There were shadows under his eyes I didn't remember seeing before. "Hi, Mum," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "Hi, Trevor." For a moment, we just looked at each other. I saw my little boy in his face, the boy who'd crawled into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd hugged me tight after every basketball game, who'd told me I was his hero. But I also saw a stranger, a man who'd hurt me more deeply than anyone else ever had. "I owe you an apology," Trevor said finally. "A real one. Not excuses or explanations, just, I'm sorry. What I did was wrong. How I treated you was wrong. You didn't deserve any of it." Tears sprang to my eyes. "Why, Trevor? Why did you do it? Why did you exclude me?" He looked down at his untouched coffee. "Because it was easier. Because Vanessa wanted it that way. And it was easier to go along with what she wanted than to deal with conflict. Because I convinced myself that you'd be fine, that you'd understand, that it wasn't that big a deal." "It was a huge deal," I whispered. It broke my heart. "I know," Trevor said, his own eyes filling with tears. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I've been thinking about it constantly, about how you must have felt, about all the years you sacrificed for me, about how I repaid all that love and dedication. I'm ashamed, Mum. I'm so ashamed." "Are you here because you're genuinely sorry?" I asked carefully. "Or because Vanessa told you to come apologize?" Trevor's jaw tightened. "She doesn't know I'm here. We've been fighting a lot. About you, about other things. She doesn't understand why I can't just move on from my guilt about the wedding. She thinks I'm being manipulated by you, even though we haven't even talked." "What do you think?" I asked. Trevor met my eyes. "I think I've let someone else define my relationship with you. I think I've been weak and cowardly, and I think I need to figure out how to fix this, if that's even possible." We talked for 2 hours, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. I told him how hurt I'd been, how betrayed I'd felt, how much his absence had cost me. He listened without defending himself, without making excuses, just listened. And I listened too, as he talked about the pressure he'd felt to live up to my sacrifices, the guilt that had shadowed his whole life, the relief he'd felt when Vanessa had framed that guilt as my fault rather than his burden to carry. It didn't excuse anything, but it helped me understand. "I don't know if we can fix this," I said honestly. "I don't know if I can trust you again." "I understand," Trevor said, "but I want to try. If you're willing. I want my mom back. I want us back." I looked at my son, this man I'd raised, this person who'd broken my heart, but who I still loved so deeply it ached, and made a decision. "We can try," I said. "Slowly, with boundaries, with honesty, but we can try." It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't everything going back to normal. But it was a beginning, a tiny, fragile beginning. And sometimes, that's enough. If you're still with me on this journey, thank you. Thank you for witnessing this story of heartbreak and hope, of betrayal, and the possibility of healing. If this resonates with you, If you've experienced a similar pain, or if you're watching someone you love go through this kind of family estrangement, please leave a comment, share your story, share your strength. Let's support each other. And please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications because the next part of this story, the continued journey toward healing, the challenges that still lay ahead, the ultimate question of whether a mother son relationship can truly be rebuilt after such deep wounds, that's coming up next. You won't want to miss it.